start your presentation.
Will
We
do.
do have Ivy here, and she's going to be talking about the medicine wheel and the shadow beings. So if everybody will turn off their video and their microphone, we'll let her have it.
Oh, I see Arya's here too. Hi, Arya. Okay, here we are. Oops, sorry. Didn't mean to take you there right away. Okay, shadow beings, what are those? This is an interesting, maybe a different way, at least for me, of looking at rock art on walls. This wall you're looking at has hundreds and hundreds of different kind of pictographs and petroglyphs on it, but you can probably not see too many unless you're really good at, you know, finding them. And the way I found what I'm going to show you is the way the light interacted with it. Some of them just popped out. I couldn't see them at all until the light interacted with them. So just so that you don't have to wait long, we'll just show you a really cool shadow being right away. Now this one, obviously I messed with the lighting a little bit because I was trying to get it the way our eyes see it. And that was as close as I could get. But you know how your eyes can take in both the dark and the bright light, where once you pick up your camera and take a picture, it kind of dulls both down. So I wanted you to get a good look at that. And then 3 other shadow beings we'll look at. The one down at the bottom, hey, you know, I think I figured out how to use a mouse with this. Oh, bear with me just a second. See if it'll work. Will it? Will it? Oops. Okay, I thought it would work, but it doesn't. Okay, so these are 3 different ones we're going to look at. And one thing to point out about these guys right away is that what I found is that there's a lot of different ways they affect you, but in all the ways they affect you, they bring you into the moment of right now. And it's that nowness of having to pay attention, look around you, see what's happening. And a person like me that tends to be real reflective and has been, what would you say? People have said my head is in the clouds, and actually it's way worse than that. My head is way beyond the clouds. It's way out in the stars somewhere. But I really needed that shock of something to just put me in the moment right now. And so anyway, shadow beings tend to do that. And they can do it by shocking you, by the drama that's playing out in front of you as the shadows move along these. There's a couple here I found out that help prepare you for something else. They just get your attention to say, look around. And that's what this guy at the bottom, the first one, I call it a mouse man, but some rock art people call that a bear. See those round ears? He's got them on both sides. You just can't see it because the shadow's breaking up the one. He's also very comedic. You see all those little lines and curves in his shield. They light up at very different times. He's like teasing you, kind of like the coyote, you know, of like, what am I doing? Why am I doing it now? And he does it so distinctly that I keep going back there, trying to catch the timing of it. And so far, a lot of cool things, but nothing that I can really point you to be sure it'll happen again. And then there's the one in the middle, I call it a turtle, a time turtle. That one kind of gives you an alert to when it's solar noon. And then right after solar noon, the third one up on the top is the one I've studied the most. I call it Hazel, and I'll tell you why later. But Hazel is a nerdy shadow being. It actually has an amazing duty that it performs, and it's not comedy. It's not really preparing you for the time of day today. It's kind of preparing you for the whole season. But it seems to be just very business-like. Maybe that's what I'm trying to say. So the people that asked me to give this talk are down there in Snowflake, Arizona, or Heber, one of the two, or both. And so I wanted you guys to see where I do this work, and it's way up there high in the Bighorn Mountains, Medicine Lodge Creek, and then I also worked for quite a while on Bighorn Medicine Wheel, and I still am. There's still more to be found out with that guy. But that's how far away it is for you. It's still snowing up here, of course. Of course, it was snowing down with you guys today. I saw it through Era's pictures. Here's a more close-up of the Bighorns. So the Bighorn Medicine Wheel, that's that picture that was taking the place of my picture before I came on. That's up high, 10,000 feet. Medicine Lodge down here below, as you can see, it's when you're kind of between the mountains and the water's rushing out to the basin. So it's kind of cooler than the rest, has more water. Wonderful place to spend time. It could have been the same people that were in both. They're only 40 miles apart. So this is Agave, and it's where we really get our only knowledge of the wheel. All the tribes that have been to that medicine wheel, they have it in their oral histories, but it was already there. It wasn't created by them. Agreda, her oral history, it was her people's wheel. They knew how to use it. She described different locations in it and connected those to the sun and probably planets by the way the translation goes. Anyway, she lived with a crow for a long time. All of her people died of smallpox. And so a lot of her stories are coming down through the crow now, and the crow actually just adopt the stories. So they are very connected to the wheel. So I'm first going to take you to the wheel because that's where a lot of the archaeoastronomy began. And it's a different kind of astronomy than they use down at Medicine Lodge, but they're both complementary. And it also shows you the tremendous sophistication of these people and what they were capable of. So here's just one side of getting up to the wheel. The wheel's up there at the top. All those little lines you see are actually posts they've put in to protect the wheel. The rocks are really more on the ground than that. Yeah, they look more like this. So if you've never read the book, The Sheep Eaters, it's about Agreda and tells her story up there. She got married up there at the wheel. Look across there though, see those mountains, how low they look. You've got an excellent horizon for watching stars set. That's the western side. And this is probably eastern, mostly eastern side. So yeah, great horizon for looking across these angles. And here's what it's like at 10,000 feet up there. I mean, you can see people living here. These weren't just peaks they went back down. And that archaeologist I showed you on the last one down there, Bashful Bill, he did a lot of archaeology up in those mountains and showed that the people didn't just hang out for hunting camps. They actually hung out there for quite a while. Water everywhere. Now this is in September. The night before, I was just in flip-flop and shorts. The stars were gorgeous. It was my first time to the wheel and we couldn't find it. We actually ended up on a different ridge wandering around for hours. But anyway, the next day we came up and this ice storm and thunderstorm ensued. It's 80 degrees down there in the basin. And I don't know what it is here, but I love the winter. I was fully geared out and I could only stay out there about 15 minutes. So you want to know when to leave this mountain if you were living up there, especially if you had grandparents and little kids and everything. And this one, check out the moon there. It just shows how easy it is to both see celestial objects, but also to track them too. Those spokes that you're seeing going out from the central cairn, I can see how they can easily track different things, kind of like our grid systems we have now. Oops, sorry. Here's a night picture we took. We were just testing it out at the time. Obviously, that's the Milky Way. That red laser is going down the solstice line, which I'm going to show you again in a minute. But there's some symbolism left from the sheep eaters about the Milky Way and the people going to the Milky Way, which is very familiar in lots of indigenous ways of seeing. And if you would walk along the solstice line to go into that Milky Way, you'd literally go off the mountain. You'd just head off a cliff. So you would probably meet your maker. Here it is from above, just in case you're not used to seeing this. 28 spokes. You see that one cairn at about 7, 8 o'clock that sticks out from the rest of the wheel. Concentrate on that one for a minute. It's the only one I'm really going to talk about. This is the same one I just asked you to look at. See how it goes right towards the rising sun on the summer solstice. Now, when a fellow named John Eddy wrote about this in the 70s, he thought that this was off by about 1.5 degrees, but he thought, well, that's pretty good. But when we went up there and measured it, it is off. The sun does come off by 1.5 degrees. But it turns out there's a rock in a hole 4 miles away that the sun used to come through. And when you measure it back that 1.5 degrees, this line still lines up with that rock. And so by doing that, we can date it to see how far the sun moved. And it's a few thousand years. So this is kind of how it works if my words aren't making sense to you. At that time, I didn't know about that rock on the horizon, so it's not in there. But it's this lineup with the sun. Now, if you were going to leave star knowledge for another generation, this would be a hard one to miss. It would really help people go, oh, this has something to do with astronomy. What else could it do? And so it would alert you to pay attention and maybe look further. What other patterns do you see that connect to the sky? Well, one of the things we know in astronomy and archaeoastronomy more actually is that the North Pole star changes over time. And you see Polaris is up there at the top, the little dipper. It's connected to it. It says plus 2000. So as you go back in time, which would be clockwise, and see how you can get to that star at about what would be 3000, but they didn't put it on there. That's Thuban. It's in the tail of the dragon. And notice that if you follow that dragon around, there's a red center to it. It's like the heart of the dragon is what I call that. And time really does revolve around the heart of the dragon. Now, in lots of cultures, this was a serpent and different things, snakes and stuff. But it's amazing how often this comes up, that there's this fight with time, and it includes this snake or serpent or dragon. And it does in astronomy, it really does, because the different pole star is going to happen as time goes on. So archaeoastronomers can look at this shift in stars. Now, a minute ago, I was talking about the shift in sun. That's different, and it happens for a different reason. But this shift in stars, you can also date things, and you can get them a lot closer because it happens so much faster. The thing the wheel did is it looked like the rim actually was the same shape as that circle of stars. I don't know if you noticed, but that circle of stars is not a perfect circle. Look down at the bottom left, like 6 o'clock and 7 or 8 o'clock. See those bright stars? Vega's the brightest, Deneb's the next. So some of these aren't neatly on the circle like Polaris and Thuban were. So if you actually connect the dots between the stars that will be the brightest near the pole, then you get something that looks like the medicine wheel. And so I took the medicine wheel out of that aerial Photoshop, got rid of the dirt, and stuck it up in the sky. And I used that same alignment. You just saw it go to the sunrise on the solstice. Well, it's not just on the ground it does that. It mirrors the sky. The medicine wheel mirrors that circle. And I left the yellow grid in there to show you how far off our modern astronomy that just likes everything to be exact and the same. But it's actually harder to remember that way because it doesn't match reality. Well, the medicine wheel matches reality. It matches the stars. If I had a pointer, I could show you all the ones that are matching that rim that will be our pole stars in this. It's about a 24, 26,000 year cycle. Well, and a cool thing in the research was this image of the medicine wheel stuck up in the sky matched the same date as when it was on the ground and you just took the shift along the horizon. So you had 2 different ways to work this and still come up with the same date. Pretty sophisticated. So yeah, I think I just threw that back in to remind you what we're doing. So if you ever wonder, could a circle of stars really, or a circle of stones really help you understand the stars? Well, the Polynesian navigators still do this with a circle of coral. And of course, you need the stories to help you remember this, because just memorizing stars is really hard for everybody. But if you have a story that goes along with them that helps you remember what this star is doing in that star and this group of stars, and then all of a sudden it becomes a lot easier. And there's one story about Mao getting out. He helped teach the Hawaiians how to navigate again. They'd supposedly lost it. So they went to him and not too sure how long ago, 15 years or more. Anyway, the Hawaiians are great navigators again now, but they had to go to Maui to learn. And when they took, one of their first journeys out, whoever was learning to navigate was a little worried. He goes, "Oh, I just don't know if this is going to work, And Mao just said, remember your stories, trust your ancestors. All those stories work. These guys find small islands, that are half a mile wide in an ocean of water. So yeah, you can learn the stars with a circle of stones. So back to Greta. So I was studying the medicine wheel and figuring some of this stuff out and thought, wow, are these people amazing? How can I know more about them? Because she died a long time ago, and she was interviewed in 1887, and she all of her kids had died and everything. So I remembered something she had said in that interview, and that's, if you want to know of her people, their stories are written on the rocks. So okay, let's go down to the rocks. So we headed down to the southern Bighorns, and that highest peak there is Cloud Peak. This is a rare photograph. I had to jump out of my car because usually it is in the clouds, just like its name implies. And so Medicine Lodge, the waters from that peak drain right into Medicine Lodge. Medicine Lodge actually has two creeks, one that runs underground, which the David from last week's talk I forgot to tell him that he would just love that because he studies water under the ground. So you have two branches of a creek that come together right here at Medicine Lodge, but one goes under and one stays above the ground. It's right off to the left of this picture. And also down there at the left is Brooks Jordan, just one of the most wonderful people you could ever meet. He was just the superintendent of this park when I met him, but he now takes care of 5 or more parks. But if you ever happen to see him, talk to him. He's a very nice guy and was very helpful in me being able to do research there. So this is just called the 10 Sleep Sandstone, and that higher sandstone you can see is harder. It's held up a lot more, and it kind of shields the cliff, at least from straight down rain. There it is looking up. Now, if you look at about 3 o'clock and close to the edge, well, it's actually cut off on the edge. Maybe it's more like 4 o'clock. You see the turtle there? And you can see the shadow coming to the turtle. So the turtle's in the sun. Well, I kind of ignored him. I thought he was cool, but he didn't catch my attention. And later I found out that he's got quite the job to do. So as we were talking before, Richard, we can't really just say rock art, because there's science in this, as you'll see in a few minutes. There's obviously history and an amazing amount of drama. But I don't know if the drama goes with the history, or if it's just for drama, or if it's for, morals or what, but there is drama. So anyway, we did a few things like check this cliff. It's a north-south cliff, which means that solar noon sun, when you're right at the midday, that's when it's going to cast the shadows. And that means that as the sun goes, higher and lower as the seasons go by, different things are going to light up and pop out. And this is just from 4th grade. I'm sure you all remember it. So you've got, winter solstice, the sun's low. Of course, this is different in South America. So winter is low. Equinox is in the middle, so summer solstice is high. Well, the timing that the hazel petroglyph, the one I told you is all nerdy, that one is all focused on another halfway mark, the mark between the highest, the summer solstice, and equinox. And why it does that took me quite a while to figure out, but I think we're on to something. So here's just a visual so you can get an idea what I'm talking about. Give me a second. I got to move something that you guys can't see, but it's in my way. Okay. So yeah, summer solstice sun way up there. Then we have autumn equinox. And you notice there is a halfway between. That's when that little nerdy hazel gets active. Now, why? Why would she care about that? It's not a cross quarter, like when you guys were talking about. And, it's not the usual normal astronomical times. So here's my graphics of kind of how this works down there. You got the hard carbonated cemented sandstone that I used to think was casting the shadows, but now I've noticed that it's probably not. It's other ridges that can be worked more easily. So I think they've worked this cliff edges or the ridges so that the shadows will move at different times. Now, does anybody here, did anyone, I didn't know it, did anyone know that shadows can move at different paces? You can have one shadow coming fast and another shadow coming slow. And it's all based on the angle that that sun is moving over. They can carve that angle to where it actually makes it look, well, it actually is happening. The shadow's slower. Well, there's a lot of drama right there. That's the hazel petroglyph again. So here's my research station. I showed this to my husband thinking he'd laugh and tell me to take it out of the talk. But instead he goes, I engineered that research station. and it does have everything you would want. Obviously there's water, you know, there's a sun hat, there's notebooks, you know. Right now no one's there. This is just a thank you slide for the photographers who I couldn't have done this without, because I couldn't get there all the time. And there's so many different times a year you want to check to see not just when it's working, the different things are working, but when they're not working, how what would you say, careful are they, or do they just happen all the time and just pretend they happened at one time or whatever, you know? So you have to find out how specific they are. That's the word I'm looking for. Oh, hi, Sarah. I didn't know you showed up. Solar marker actually has a definition these days. A solar marker is an intentional rock art glyph panel which records a significant component, I thought that was interesting, of the astronomical knowledge of a culture, preserving the interactions of light and shadows on the rock art at specific solar points. And that's the thing I was saying, that what solar point is Hazel doing? Why does it care? And then another quote from Gordon Houston: the solar marker acts as a mnemonic device, and this knowledge is passed from one generation to the next. And I will add to that, it can be passed on to someone outside the culture. And I argued this with other archaeoastronomers, but I think it can be passed on to someone outside the culture because it's talking about the sky, and we share the sky. That sky is the language. So we do have a common language to look at these things, mnemonic devices they left so they could remember. Well, we can remember too. Story time. Okay, it's story time. So I'm sitting there. I took Greta's advice. I went to Medicine Lodge, sat down in my research chair. It was broiling hot, late August. Not really a time of year you'd think was astronomical, but see, I wasn't looking for astronomy at the time. I was trying to understand her people. And actually the shadows were kind of in my way. The first pictures I took pictures of that whole wall, thinking I'll take them home and I'll study every one. And I laughed at them the other day when I looked at them because not one even has a shadow in it. So I obviously wasn't tuned into the shadows being part of this whole what's going on. But as I sat there that day, trying to clear my mind, get rid of all my Western astronomy and my Western thinking, and just basically not think, just look at the cliff and let it think at me. And I kept getting hotter and hotter, nothing was happening, but I thought, I'm just gonna sit here, I'm not gonna leave. I'm gonna convince this cliff I really wanna understand. And I thought, well, if Greta would tell someone who wasn't part of her culture, if you want to know about us, go down and read the walls, it's all there. I thought if she would say that, then, you know, maybe there's a way. So I just kept sitting there. My husband came down, he'd been on a hike, really hot. He was ready for lunch and stuff. And I said, no, I can't leave. I gotta sit here. I've got to do this. Well, right about then, if you look over to your left, right where the shadow kind of goes up and down, and the light has that mouse-eared guy. Can you see his belly, or they call it a shield, with all those lines and arcs in it? Right when I looked up at that point, when I just convinced myself I was not going to leave until something happened, right then, his whole head and ears, the shadow went around his head and ears. It's lower than that now. It's right on his neck. And when it did that, it also went around two friends right next to him. They just popped out of the cliff. And he has kind of a goofy look on his face, especially with those big ears. And I just like that can't be on accident, you know? And so that made me immediately look around the cliff. And I had no even concept of solar noon at this time, you guys. I wasn't, like I said, I wasn't even looking for astronomy. I was looking for knowledge of a culture. And so it didn't dawn on me, oh, it's about solar noon, wait till it happens. Nothing, none of that. I was just sitting there looking. But he looked so amazing that I couldn't believe that could be an accident. So I look along the cliff, and then if you look way up there to the top right, there's a really dark shadow coming down with a nice little arc in it. I thought, huh. And I looked down farther, and that's Hazel up there. Oh gosh, about a fifth of the screen down, way over to the right. And there's two shadows approaching it, one from the left, that little dark straight one, and the curved one from above. Well, Hazel has a straight line and some curves. I thought, well, I'm going to wait for that. Well, it was so hot. You know, my husband didn't want to wait, but I just said, I can't leave. So here's Hazel, and then I drew it so you can get a little better idea. And I didn't force that smile at all. I just put a little dot in every place he was pecked, and it came out that sweet smile. And check out his feet. One is flat, and the other toe is up, like I'm heading somewhere, you know. And he's heading south, if that is what he's trying to tell you. So I'm watching for that shadow to come down. Here's his whole, well, not the whole panel. I'm still missing one. I'll show that to you in a second. These three and the fourth one you'll see in a minute seem to have the same kind of depth of pecking, and they look like they're all pecked at the same time. I have no idea what the other three do or mean. The closest I've got is that third one with his arm up, like he's saying stop. The shadow does hit that, but I can't even remember what time of year that was. Yeah, I'm not even going to say because I'm not sure. But at any rate, all four of them seem to go together. So there must be maybe a story or something that tied these people. Look at the weird feet on the guy on the right. He's got some kind of pads and then big claws. Then the middle guy has maybe some kind of hoof looking thing, and his legs are thicker, like they're furry. Plus you can see both of those guys have horns. Hazel doesn't have horns, and he has more, you know, maybe human-like feet. So here's a little drawing of them. Now you can see that fourth one. See, all three have horns except Hazel. And then there's also these little ladders down below. And I have not actually paid that much attention to those because I just didn't notice them until I was there one year and the light was marching down them. And then I haven't gone back. I mean, it's hard to believe that I do nothing but study this one Hazel, but really it's been like 6 years and that's all I've done. It's pretty intriguing. So here's the mouse man. Let's see if I'm going to show you the next one. Oh, okay. And so this is what happened. Sure enough, the light came down. One shadow came halfway and the other side came to that arc. Now, it wasn't until later when we got home and we started analyzing the timing of this that we realized it was solar noon, very close to it, to solar noon. And there may even be a nerdy reason why it's a few minutes after solar noon. That might be something special that helps something work. You know, I'm still working on that. But at any rate, very close to solar noon when that happens. But each day it changes. It still comes to the halfway, but it gets farther down or different time of year, farther up. And over a 2-week period, it goes through all of those arcs. And here we go. In August, it starts way up there where you see the picture on top. The shadow will start all the way at the bottom. And then every few days, it hits another arc, until it's all the way off of it. It's about 2 weeks and the whole thing is balanced. I think I'm going to tell you how it's balanced in a minute, so I won't get ahead of myself. But I mean, if you saw that picture, especially the one on the right, the day I saw it, it was so balanced. The one shadow came right down to the edge of the circle, made the arc. The other shadow hit that midline. I'm like, oh man, there's something going on here. Oh, here's a time lapse. You get to watch it. Now this is way speeded up. If you're there, you have to sink into rock time. You don't get it this fast, but it's kind of fun when it is this fast. Oops. See if I can figure out how to make it go. And there, that's when we would clock it, is right when that middle line hit. And then after it gets done with the circle, then it just kind of washes quickly across the whole thing. Okay, now that you know what it's going to look like, you can watch it. Now, when people would come and help me, I'd always say, tell me right when you think it fills that left side, yell out now. And then that's the time I would clock. And it took me a long time to kind of realize where the medium was. But then I thought, well, quit trying to force it. Look at Hazel. What's Hazel telling you? And as you can see, she's split in half. She has 5 lines, so one of them is a middle line. She's all about halves of something. And remember, she does this when the sun is half the height from its highest to its midpoint at equinox. So she's all about half. It's kind of partly why she has the name Hazel. And I'll describe that in a few minutes. So yeah, this is just to remind you that she works in that middle time, in that halfway time. Now, what about living at Medicine Lodge? Would you want a solar marker that did this? Why would you care? Let's see, I think this is an animation. Give me a second. Oh yeah. Okay, so this is just to show it in cartoon form. There's your midline, and it actually has another role I found out the next year too. But right now we'll just say that's our clock time. That's when we clock it and see where it is on the right side. So when the sun is at that middle point, half altitude, hold on, let me make sure I'm telling you this right. Yeah, it's not only the half altitude of the sun at midday, it's also the halfway point in the sun rising between solstice sunrise and equinox. And that point I call cross azimuth. But that does not have a name in Western science. And I've looked for a name in indigenous languages. So if any of you know anything that would help me with the word for this. But right now, it's just that crossway point. People just assume that's the cross quarter day, but it's not. Cross quarter day is a different place on the horizon. So this is totally connected, not to the halfway in days, but in the halfway of where the sun comes up and where the sun is at midday. They happen to be the same day. So that's when it starts. 2 weeks later, it goes through this motion. You know, you watch it each day, and when the shadow gets to that midline, that other arcing shadow keeps going. It takes about 2 to 3 days to get between each one of these. And then it gets to where it hits the shoulder. And I'm not kidding, all of a sudden the face is smiling. Because otherwise the face goes into darkness right away. But okay, so it goes all the way up there. And Hazel is happy, and oops, thought there was one more thing there. Anyway, Hazel is happy. Why? I don't know. Their feet are pointing towards the south. Does that mean anything? So here's the data that goes with that, or the data. So the graph up on top, you can see that each arc, those are arcs of where the sun's path is each day, or during that time period. I guess it is each day. It gives you the date. They're about a month apart. So notice how in the middle there's a bigger space. So the sun drops down a lot faster or rises a lot faster in that August area and in, I think it's the March area, than it does at other times a year. So it's not even. And I'll show you another graph on that too. And so you have this big jump. Well, if you've heard of solar insolation, it's just kind of a fancy word. That's that thing we all know about the sun, how it feels on a late March day versus January. It can be bright as can be, bright sun in January, Northern Hemisphere. And the sun on you just doesn't quite have the heat. It's nice, but get towards the end of March or April and the sun's starting to burn. It's got intensity. Well, that's called solar insolation. And it's not insulation like you would insulate your house, but insole like the sun, S-O-L, soul. So insolation is this thing you're seeing on the bottom here where the angle of the rays put a lot more power into the Earth's atmosphere and the surface, warming us up and warming us up quickly. Or in August, cooling us down because it's going the other way. And it turned out that when we looked at precipitation and temperature, which is the bottom graph there, sure enough, right at the end of August, when little nerdy Hazel is doing her thing, temperatures are dropping, precipitation's going up. Now, if you're at 10,000 feet up at the medicine wheel and living up there, that's a real good time where, yeah, it might have snowed on you in the summer off and on, but this time of year when it snows, it's not necessarily going to melt. So if you don't get off that mountain now, you'll be trudging through it and pulling grandma and the kids through it. I always say grandma. It's probably grandpa you'd be pulling. Grandma's tough. Anyway, the top graph, the green line, if the sun did drop each day at its solar noon position, if it dropped evenly the same amount every day, it would be that green line. But we just saw in that other graph that it does not drop by the same amount each month. It has big dives in places. Well, that's the blue is the actual sun, data from the actual sun. And you can see it dips a little faster between July, and then late August to September, it is cruising down fast, and it keeps going right till October. So yeah, the temperatures are going to start changing really quickly. Hazel also does the opposite in late March. But it's kind of confusing to talk about both at once. I just find I always lose everybody. So I'm just going to focus on August, but obviously because it's about the sun, it is going to be symmetric with the solstices. So it also tells you kind of when it's getting warm enough where you could go up to higher altitude. But I think Hazel, because her feet are pointed south, I think she's kind of telling us when it's time to get down. Okay, this is a fun one. Let's see if I can get it to work. Is anyone familiar with anemones? They're extraordinary. So this is at Medicine Lodge, but that is not the scenery of Medicine Lodge. That's just one I grabbed off my star program. So here we are, sun's low. It's near winter solstice. And now summer solstice, it's high. Now Hazel works right when it's right there at that crossover. Because the equinoxes are actually about there. And then Hazel, and then the summer solstice, back to Hazel, and then back to the equinox. So Hazel starts when the sun is at the mid height that I showed you, the mid altitude. And it ends at that crossover. So it does both. It does the mid height and the crossover. They're not the same. For like 2 years, I thought they were the same. And Hazel taught me they're not, because I had to dig deeper. I had to go out and look at it. This stuff isn't written in astronomy books. You don't just get it easy. You got to earn it. And I can guarantee you that after this talk, you're one of the few people on the planet that have it. So if you have it. Okay, I know it's complicated. Okay, so what does Hazel do? She's awesome. She has these 2 points in time. The bottom one is when you have that mid-altitude. The top one is when you have that crossover of the analemma. How the heck did they know about the crossover of the analemma? Because that has to do with our orbit, the speed of, our spin of the Earth compared to our orbital spin. Because we go faster, when you get near a massive object, you go faster, and then you slow down as you go away. So even though we're mostly around orbit, we do have enough eccentricity that we do speed up and slow down in different parts. And our day isn't always 24 hours. When our day is 24 hours, when our spin speed to the sun, okay, this is kind of tricky, so just pay attention for a minute. When our spin of our Earth, each day spin, when that speed where we come back to look at the sun at solar noon, when that matches our spin speed to the stars, now you probably thought that matched already. It even has 2 different names, synodic and sidereal time, and synodic and sidereal days. You don't have to remember that. But anyway, Hazel keeps track of that. Now, how the heck does Hazel know that? And that I'm still working on. I have my own gnomon I set up. I'm working on all this stuff saying, if you knew the stars well, like Mao, the Polynesian navigator, if you knew the stars well enough that in your head, you knew that, say, the Scorpion was opposite the sky than Orion, that you could split the sky like the medicine wheel does in these different directions, but you would know that through the stories, like, when old Uncle so-and-so comes to town, my Aunt so-and-so leaves. So you have these stories that just help you keep track of this, you could say grid, but that sounds very Western science-ish. If you knew that, if you knew the stories of the sky that well, then I can see how Hazel could keep track of this. But it would take that depth of knowledge, but we know that existed. Mao takes over moves through the ocean using knowledge that deep. Anyway, so then the midway point, I'm just pointing it out because it was also a halfway. So we had the halfway in altitude of the sun. We had the halfway of the sun's rise. We had this halfway crossover point of the analemma. And then we've got this halfway in Hazel herself, which was the key to the whole thing that helped me unlock how this worked. Okay, but there's more. How can such a cute little petroglyph have so much? That line we found after the eclipse, whatever year that was, was that 2017? We had a full moon a few days, well, I guess it was 2 weeks after the eclipse. So we thought, what does moonlight do? Like Richard was talking about earlier. So sure enough, you can do a lot of this, if not all of it, by moonlight. Well, the moon shadow came right up to that. It didn't go to the midway. And we're like, what? We never even noticed that was flat. In fact, did any of you notice that was flat? I just thought Hazel was a circle. I've always drawn it as a circle, but nope, it's flat. Let's see if I took you right to it. Oh, Alec, I'm just going to show you the feet, I guess. So the feet and the smile are also part of what Hazel is. So I'm going to tell you more about that shadow and the moon in a minute. Sorry to leave you hanging there. I thought the next slide was right here. Okay, so we came back. That story was all about August. We came back in equinox, but we really didn't find much in equinox. Not on this guy. Years later, I brought more people so we could look at more things at one time, and you'll see what happened then with the other shadow beings. But for Hazel, we're almost done with her. So what did happen though in May, cross quarter in days, not in azimuth or in altitude, but in days, the cross between the equinox and the solstice. In days, Hazel keeps track of that. Look at that beautiful little half. There's no arcs. No arcs are part of it anymore. She's just saying, hey, we're halfway. If you go there just a couple days later, it's already angled off. That's how specific it is. It lines up with that straight line, just right on it. Now this needs more work because you could play around with during what time period did cross quarter land perfectly on this day. You know, that's kind of something to play with because the days aren't even. I don't know if you guys know that between equinoxes and solstices, summer solstices, and equinoxes and winter solstices. We actually have different counts of days. Time is a pretty crazy thing. Okay, back to that moon thing. This slide should have come first. So when you look at a moon shadow, be sure you note the time and obviously the day, because you can spin ahead your clock to 6 months from wherever you saw the moon do it, and the sun will be very close to that same position in the sky. So then you can come back to that rock art and see the sun do it 6 months later. So sometimes that's an easier way if there's too much snow or it's too hot or whatever. You might choose to use the moon, or other very cool things could happen and pop out that you don't see during sun times. But anyway, but it's not totally straightforward, like just 6 months, boom, because the moon's path in the sky and the sun's path in the sky can be up to 5 degrees different one way and then 5 degrees different the other way. So the moon can, you know, anywhere in a 10-degree space from where the sun's going to be. But it's a good starting point. If you have a star program, then you just look at what the moon's altitude was there on the left. He's in Aquarius and it's the water pouring out. You look at what that altitude is, and then you just spin, you're near 6 months, and then you just kind of spin the days until you get the sun to be that altitude. Then you go, okay, March 1st, I need to go back on March 1st if I want to see that shadow do that thing on Hazel. Okay, let's just summarize. What all did you all figure out? Cross quarter days, found out that midline was that. Halfway in the altitude, halfway in the azimuth. Forgot to even tell you this. Well, that halfway point is also one sidereal, which means star, cycle of the moon until equinox. That could be helpful for hunting or other ceremonies. I'm not even going to try to guess, but it's a pretty cool idea. That analemma crossover, and it's also when that solar mean time, when that 24-hour day actually matched a solar day. Half a moon phase cycle before the equinox. Sorry, I didn't really give you that information, and your head's probably too full right now, so I won't bother. Okay, so let's go see another shadow being. Here's the time turtle. Now, this fellow I totally underestimated for a long time. He kind of looked like a practice one. He looks like hazel. And well, everybody said, how could they make hazel and make it so beautiful and perfect? Right up, I'm like, well, I don't think they did. You probably have a lot of knowledge before you start making something like that. But anyway, I thought, well, maybe this is a practice guy. I should watch him. And I think it is a turtle. It seems to have flappers, and you can't see all of it right now, kind of a little head. But at any rate, he does do something. See that shadow that comes halfway across? On the, was it the equinox? Yeah, I think it's the equinox is when he does this. Remember, hazel didn't really do anything on the equinox. But he also does it at a specific time. I believe he's the closest to solar noon of any of them. I'm not too sure that's important, but so here we have the three that I've been looking at. The mountain person over at the left, or the bear, and then that turtle guy in the middle. And that's kind of the timing they go off. See, you can tell the mouse guy, the shadow's already got to his shoulders. So he's already given his alert. And then the shadow is just getting to the middle of the turtle. He'll give next alert. And then you look over there at Hazel on your right. He's got a little ways to go. So if you're hanging around at the cliff, eating and talking and being with your friends, and you want to know what time of year it is, what should we be doing about now? Hazel's the one that's going to tell you that very carefully, but it gives you two different warnings at least to tell you when it's time to look up, because you saw how fast the time lapse goes. If even though it's slower when you're standing there, it's still many times my photographers said, I just turned away to talk to somebody to tell them what Hazel was going to do, and oops, it was done. And they wouldn't get pictures of it. And it's happened to me too. You just have to say, I can't talk to you for a few minutes, because when it goes, it's going to go. Now, another thing about Hazel, if you think about it, if it goes for 2 weeks, if you miss any day, you can miss 10 of those days, and you still know exactly where you are in the year. And in fact, because of those arcs, you can tell where you are in what today we call the leap year. Because remember, each year isn't 365 days perfectly, and it's definitely not 360 days like the degrees in a circle. So you've got that little shred hanging over that we get used to calling, you know, the leap year. The shreds add up and we just add another day. Well, Hazel doesn't have to do this, because every year it shows you exactly where you are in that cycle, because the sun isn't going to hit that same spot, because it's going to be 6 hours off. Sorry if that's hard to track. For those of you who can track it, there, the rest of you don't worry about it. It's just really, it's very sophisticated. And it's because it has a direct correspondence to the sun. It's not a mathematical one like our calendars are. Okay, so here's how Hazel got her name. Half azimuth, half altitude. Maybe you figured that out already. So I usually don't talk to people when I'm down there unless they talk to me. But on this one day, a lady saw me staring at the cliff, and she goes, "What are you doing?" And she kept looking at the cliff to see what was happening. And I said, well, in about 15 minutes, something's going to happen that only happens twice a year, and it's a sunny day. So, you know, you might get to see it. Well, she, without even knowing what it did, got all excited, and she ran around camp gathering people. And all of a sudden, people were there with their chairs and their drinks and their umbrellas. They were getting all excited to watch her do her thing. Oops, what happened to Hazel? Oops, sorry. Should be one more slide. Anyway, so there was a kid behind me when it happened, and he was so excited, but he's the anonymous teenager. He goes, you know, he got all quiet. And he just says this out loud: "This is like watching paint dry." Everybody got a kick out of that. And then I turned to him and I said, you know, there's one interesting thing about this. I challenged him and I said, we're not used to slowing down, and probably none of these adults can do it. And it was mostly adults. As you can see, there was a few kids. And I said, but you know, fourth graders really are the best at it, but teenagers might still be able if they tried. And that's to alter your perception of time, actually slow down to the speed of whatever it is, you know, you're part of. You've probably seen those video clips of like hummingbirds where they slow it down. You can actually see its wings and slowing way down a fly, and you can see it leaves backwards, or slow down a drop of water and see how it splashes. Well, I think especially a sky watcher needs to be able to change how they perceive time. And of course, as far as we know, the people that put these works up on the walls didn't have cars or spaceships that we know of. And so they're probably more used to pacing possibly a little better with the natural world than we do. But anyway, I challenged that teenager that he might be able to do it. I said, you might see this where I don't think your parents would really be able to. Well, oh my gosh, that shut him up, and he was going to see it, you know? And so then I think all the other adults, though, they wanted to try it too. So once again, it all just went hush as they watched it. So anyway, it happens about August 28th is when it's right in the middle. So if you get there about a week early or a week late, you'll still see it do something. It'll be on one of those arcs, but I think it's just the coolest to see right when it's in the middle because it's so distinct. Okay, so I went back on an equinox and took some friends and people who artist, other fellow's an engineer, and he's also a filmographer, which he's really good at looking at how things move and lighting and everything. So I thought, okay, these two people would be great. So we spread out along the cliff, and I had always wanted to see what this, what I call a gnomon hole, was doing. It had all these lines and stuff around it. There are a lot of holes on this cliff, but this was the one that had all these markings. And as you can see, that shadow is going across a circle. There's only part of the circle in the picture. And this was the equinox. So since I knew Hazel didn't do much on the equinox, I let myself go down here. I found a really straight stick, but my first thing is, will it even stay in the wall? This is probably a ridiculous thing to do. That hole is carved just right to hold a stick. And there's other holes, like bird holes. I even went around and checked different ones out. So I was like, are they all like this? And no, but this one, it had an angle to where slide the stick along that angle and it would just clock in there. Also, see the lines above the stick. Now, why would you need lines above a stick? The sun's not coming from below. What the heck? But as I put that stick in and just tried to use my own eyes to level it, I realized I could level it using those lines. It's a little off in this picture I took. But when I looked at that, I could move that stick just a titch, and I could tell if it was like using a level with a bubble in it. You know, I could tell if it was lined up. I could tell that. So I was pretty excited, even though all it did is touch that circle. And then there were some more lines down there, but somebody was screaming down the cliff, so I had to go see what they saw. So this isn't what they saw. This is actually what I saw. A little earlier than solar noon. I raced down to that gnomon during solar noon, but this is what I call the shaman, and he's holding back the darkness. He's now engulfed. I had a movie of this, so I'm sorry that all I have is a still because I haven't got the movie transferred yet. But I watched the whole thing play out because I got used to this idea, and this is what I hope to inspire all of you to do. If you go to a rock art place, if it's a north-south cliff, be there at noon, be there at solar noon, watch the shadows. And if it's an east-west cliff, then you're going to want sunrise, sunset on those ones. And then there's the ones that just cracks and angles above. So, but if you have a nice long cliff and it's running really good north and south, be there at solar noon and watch. So as I'm watching this guy, he was really lit up, and there's a whole bunch of little people down below him there. And some of them at the very end have kind of happy faces, like they're just partying or something. And I thought, oh, that's kind of neat. What's going on here? Well, as this darkness started coming down, the shaman guy, see how he's pointing with that one hand, or kind of looks like he's pointing? At that point in time, which is an earlier point than this, his arm was like looking up at the darkness, like he's saying, it's coming, the darkness is coming. And now you can see the darkness has actually engulfed him. It's that point that's over him now that he was pointing to earlier. But then as the darkness came back down, this is where the shadows went 2 different paces. It looked like he was holding the light. He was holding the shadow back because the shadow on him was just hanging there, and he was holding that arm up at it. The shadow over the people just started taking them out one by one. And as soon as it took out the one that looked like he was smiling and partying, the second one, all of a sudden I realized he had a face and an expression too. And his expression had like this straight line in his mouth, like, oh God, what's happening? And then all of a sudden he's engulfed in darkness. And here's the shaman still pointing, still holding back the darkness, you know, and keeping the shaft light going. But one by one, you know, these people were falling into darkness. And then finally, what you see, the darkness came over the shaman. And I'm like, oh, wow, that was something, you know. But as soon as the darkness went over him, look how bright he still is. He was pecked differently than the people. The people were just kind of outline pecked. And when they went into darkness, you couldn't see him. When he went into darkness, and once again, this is a camera, so you're not seeing it as bright as it was. And it's something worth going to see. It happens on the equinox. When he went into darkness, I was like, oh, well, end of show. And instead, the whiteness of his body just came jumping out of the darkness at me. I'm like, oh! And my first thought was just like, well, of course, the shaman is full of light, you know? He can be in the darkness and still glow. So anyway, I got to get the movie downloaded so you could see it a few times. But better yet, see it in person, because when you're there, feel the heat on you. You feel the coolness of those shadows coming. This is a shadow being event that I would call drama. And I don't know, there's some moral there too, or just the human condition of the darkness overtaking us while we're partying and not caring and not listening to the shaman. Maybe there's some of that in there too. Now, this one was fun. This is the one the engineer found. All we were doing before solar noon was to just go along the cliff. If anything kind of speaks to you or you like the look of it, you know, watch the shadows. But look to see if the shape of the shadow looks like it's going to enter the shape of some art. And so he saw this line. Can you see the line right next to the shadow being's right eye, but it's on our left? See that kind of dark line? It goes right along the shadow. So that's all. The fellow's name was Emil Branson. That's all he saw was the line, but the shadow was just the same shape coming at it. And he's like, oh boy, I think I found something. And he was yelling at us. We came over earlier and said, yeah, that could line up depending on, you know, how the shadow keeps moving. So, you know, we all went to our respective places to look at what we were looking at. And all of a sudden, I can't quite remember the words he yelled out, but he starts yelling out words. And I do not remember if by the time we got there, we could see it anymore. I don't remember how long it lasted, but I know second day, we were hoping like mad it would happen twice. So I got this on the second day. On the second day, see how what's on our right side, his left part of his head, how it kind of washes over maybe to a feather there, or those 2 lines going out. I think I'll show you a bigger one in a minute. And his face has been defaced too with like SH or something, somebody scratched into it. So the day before that, it wasn't quite as big. It seemed a little more defined around his face, but I'll have to go there again to take a better picture. But what this does is it's not really there at all. And then all of a sudden, boom, it comes out. And this shadow being only has, Amiel and I talked about this the other day to see if either of us could remember how long it lasted, because we're just busy standing in front of it, stunned and looking at it. And this is a still picture, right? So you've got to think this is dynamic. His expressions are changing. This mouth that looks one way, I mean, he looks kind of friendly, like he's, hey, hi, I'm here, you know, I'd love to talk to you. And you're like, I talk to you. You don't look too scary. But he kind of changes. Almost like he starts getting a little worried or something. And then I tried to, like I was telling you earlier, tried to modify it to get it a little more like we saw it, because the shadows were darker. He was brighter. He comes zipping out of that thing. And and this is, I think, just all of those pictures were within a minute. So he's moving that fast and changing. Now I'm thinking he's looking a little worried. And I didn't even notice until I did the pictures because I was so focused on his face. But it looks like he's also got shoulders, like he's, anyway, I got to go back there and watch this guy again. So equinox, solar noon. I don't believe 3 days after equinox, I don't think he did it at all. So we caught him right on equinox and the day after, which makes sense, you guys, because equinox doesn't actually happen at noon very often. It happens somewhere in that 24 hours. So he will also be different each year by a little bit until, we get to the leap year thing and it all looks the same again. Okay, so I don't know if you guys are familiar with George Bach Friesen. He has gone off to the spirit world, but he was about 90 something when he did. A wonderful guy. He's pretty much the man in Wyoming. He said way back when he decided to try out to see if you could really kill a big animal like a mammoth with a spear and a point. And I guess in Africa they had a elephant that was dying of some disease, and he asked him if he'd let him know when it died, and he'd come over and try out his spears on its hide after it was dead. But just because it had a tough hide too, and it worked, and so he got just kind of acclaimed for being an experiential archaeologist, which is part of what gave me the inspiration to decide to be an experiential archaeoastronomer. Not just to talk and think about this stuff, but go out and practice it and do it. And I've learned so much astronomy that isn't in the books, unless I go back, way back. Some of the astronomy I've learned from, like the medicine wheel, I did find in Babylonian astronomy, but it's not in modern books. It's like people are clueless about it. Anyway, that was just a little side. But even being an archaeologist, he was amazed at what we were finding with the shadows there. It's just, in fact, there's a whole group of rock art people there one day when I was there, and they all leave at noon to go have lunch. So they definitely weren't even studying. They studied the whole wall and wrote papers on it, and not one of them was there at solar noon when the shadows played. So it's kind of a whole new thing to think about doing. So this is just a brief little glimpse into the mind of an archaeoastronomer. Now, think about it. I don't even have all the planets in there. There is the moon. But it's a spatial thing that you kind of carry around, and you keep track of all these angles and rhythms, and all of these angles and rhythms change. They don't sit still like this. So when you go to a site, you have to think about what day, what angle of the earth is it now, and what angle was it before? Because the earth, it's that big arrow to the coming up out of the earth. That thing bobs. It doesn't just circle around to those different pole stars. It bobs back and forth, up and down, farther south and north in a 40,000 year cycle. So all these cycles don't match up neatly either. So trying to force rock art into our kind of calendar is harder than just learning from it. And once it shows you what it's doing, then go try to explain it to somebody in the language we use. And then here I just put it in words in a list for anybody who likes it that way. But basically, we have at least 3 different kinds of astronomy. The horizon one, which we did up at the medicine wheel, where we watch sunrises, stars rise, star sets, things like that. The meridian, which is what we're down at the rock art cliff, where things happen at solar noon and things pass by. They do what we call transit past that meridian above our head. And then you have a celestial sphere astronomy, which is really, you're looking at the whole thing at once, which you can also do at the medicine wheel. And the medicine wheel with those 28 spokes, it's basically makes its own grid system. And a fellow that helped me so much when I was getting my degree, Jeff Gamble, he's also an astronomer and, works with his telescope, and also worked with native people. He knows a couple languages that he's writing the dictionaries for. That some elders passed on to him. But at any rate, when I was studying the medicine wheel, he said, Ivy, a sky watcher wouldn't need all this. You wouldn't need the grid system on the ground. You wouldn't need it to point to the sunrise on solstice. And that really helped me think about it, because you're right. This is to teach somebody else. It also could be a place to gather different sky watchers so that their languages could combine when they said, okay, looking at this is, you know, and they could kind of have a big ideogram, I guess is what I call it, is, I want to say symbol, but that almost isn't enough. But you have this medicine wheel, just like you have hazel, but hazel seems to point to just a couple times a year, where the medicine wheel can basically do almost anything. So it does make sense that it's a teaching site, and it could still be a teaching site. It still works. Obviously, this rock art still works. It hasn't stopped. It's not just the thing of the past. Okay, this is just for fun. Last two slides. Also a kind of astronomy I haven't talked about at all, but we saw how some of this could work in Peru at Machu Picchu. And some of you might find these basins. So I wanted to bring this up because archaeologists sometimes find these flat basins and they want to think of them as a place where they ground, you know, corn or something, but they wouldn't work. They have rims on them. They're flat. They don't look like they've been worked. They don't find corn in them. But what they can do is be pools of water. And to not twist your brain too much, why would you want to look at water if the sky's right there? Well, think about this for a minute. The way the stars move on the water, being a mirror image, is going to shift in a different direction than the sky. And if you look close at the ones on the water, you can see how the stars have kind of streaked and made lines. This is because whoever took the picture had their camera on something that moved at the same pace as the Earth. So the stars up above, here, let me show you another one. The stars up above stayed pretty much dots, but on the water, the Earth was still turning and his camera was turning the speed of the sky. So the ones on the ground actually made the star lines. So at any rate, there's a lot you can do by looking at angles and stuff if you can get two skies like that together. And plus, think of how you could mark it. If you have a little pool of water in front of you, you could put sticks across it. You could do little things to the corner of your bowl, all sorts of things to track what's going on. So it'd be a very useful way. And anybody who has a dark sky can do this in their backyard. So, okay, that's the last. And this is my thanks to all these wonderful people that helped me out at different times in all of this pursuit. I think I said about everything. Okay, that's it. Any questions?
Well, thank you, Ivy. That was very interesting. I really enjoyed it, and you had an awful lot for us to be thinking about.
Yeah, I hope I didn't totally overwhelm you. Some of you will figure that out. You're sleeping. Just have some really interesting dreams.
Right.
I usually try to shy back, but I just thought, what the heck? Some of you came to the talk last week, so I wanted to give you a little more.
Well, you did great. It was nice watching the same thing over, and I got to pick out things that I didn't see the first time. Yeah, we've got a couple of people ask questions. See if I can read it. Thanks, Ivy. I learned a lot from Tempe. And
oh, Tempe was here. All right.
how do you go to the next one? There's a Peggy. Okay, I don't see how to get to the next chat.
Verde Valley chapter. Appreciate the invitation to tonight's presentation.
Amazing phenomenon
Oh.
from Armando.
Oh, all right. Armando knows a lot, so he probably caught a lot of that went over most of us.
Okay, well, does anybody else have questions to ask or comments to make?
Oh, it looks like Arya is asking what made you plan to look into this cliff. Oh, Arya, that was that older woman you saw the picture of, Greta. Sorry, I just thought of something that Arya knows, but about a place she and I worked on, but I can't really mention that one. So Greta, she just had that power about her of knowledge. And I just thought, man, if she would say, go down there, you could learn about my people. I just took her for her word and went down there, and it all just kind of happened. Sarah Mast, my mouth is hanging open. As always with your ideas. My question, couldn't you do experiential archaeoastronomy? Man, you spelled all of that right, Sarah. Experiential archaeoastronomy anywhere, even on other planets. I'm kind of hoping to get asked to go to other planets and figure out stuff. How could you get students to learn about another sense of time? Oh, I've really thought about that, because in the next book that I want to do, I shied away from it in Star Circle, but I want to really do a chapter. So Armando, I'd be really interested in your thoughts too, because you've worked with different people, in that how do you even get people to calm down and get into a different time? And what way, if I wasn't there to even help them do it, then how would you do it through words? So I'm actually struggling, but I think there might be some way. Key to young students who grew up in a digital world. Yeah, I know. Yep, it's a challenge, but I'm up for it.
Well,
Let's see, if it was me, what question would I ask? I would ask, how the heck are you going to figure out, without using computers in your star system, when the Earth's spin matches the star's spin, when the Earth to the sun matches the star's spin? That's what I would ask myself, and I still am asking myself that. So when I get an answer, I'll share it.
well, it is very
Oh,
interesting.
Julia, I didn't know Julia was here. Julia, you must have a question.
I'm thinking. I'll try and come up with something.
I think I can say one thing that Julia knows a little bit about, and that's that, did you see this, let's see, let me find it. I kind of zipped by it because I didn't want to run out of time, but when you get to Medicine Lodge, remember this slide? This is something, Julia, that I think you could do in your experience, is that this is where the North Stars would be circling round and round and round. And so as they shift over time, different stars would be circling at different heights. And I think you might remember about the bear walking in the north, the story about the bear walking along the northern horizon and going back up to the sky to gather water. Well, some of these figures on the cliff may actually be talking about this northern direction. And that's what I haven't done yet, is gone there with astrophotography and looked at how these stars match this as they come out of this cliff, because this is just like putting, obviously, a line down the north. So yeah, think about that, Julia, because that has something to do with your future, your specific future.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Oh, was I even sharing? You guys, could you even see that?
No.
Oh, shoot. Here I had my whole thing going. I'm like, oh, yeah. Okay, let me just show it to you for a sec. Somebody should have yelled at me. Oh, this one. Right in here. This is where those northern stars that do a circumpolar, you know, and you're cutting the sky in half with this cliff. Everything I did was solar noon looking at the sun, but you could also do a nighttime thing here. And I convinced the superintendent to turn off the light. He had a light on the cliff, you know, trying to keep it safe. But I said, no, you need to turn that off so we can see the moon and the stars. And he did. See, that's how great he was to work with. Okay, now I'll stop sharing. Oh, we got an idea from Gail. It would be cool to have a tutorial about how we could make our own wall art. Ooh, that interacts with moons of the sun. Sarah, of course, Sarah, you'd be into that. Yeah, good idea. And I think too, for the visitors that come to Medicine Lodge, if we put kind of a big kind of a big metal post or something where you could hang clay circles off of it, and then you could carve things into them and just see how the sun hit them that very day, and then take your clay thing home, you know, with you, and have a few up there for examples. It's one way I've thought of being able to get visitors actually involved in it. And then they'd kind of get an idea of how fast shadows move, because they'd be carving it in and watching whether it was doing what they wanted it to.
Well,
Painting canvas. It's a whole new world.
well, Ivy, I want to thank you for your presentation. It was very enjoyable, very interesting. And I guess we don't have any more comments. I'll go ahead and shut the meeting down.
Okay, well, thank you, Richard. It was great, and thank you all for coming.